Welcome to episode 151 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. When I had small children, back in the early 90s, a book came out that was one of my favorite books to read to them. It was That's Good, That's Bad by Marjorie Kyler. The story is of a boy who goes to the zoo with his parents and ultimately has all sorts of close encounters with wild animals. What I liked about it is that every interaction was assumed to be either good or bad, and proved to be the opposite of what was originally assumed. This is one of my favorite things about life. We think we know if something is good or bad, but we really don't. We think that things are either good or bad, and they aren't. Life is not binary. It is never that simple. I liked that this book challenged that assumption, and it did it for children who are in the process of forming their own ideas of how the world works. Parents and caregivers are responsible for helping children develop their own ideas of how the world works. This is some of the most important work that they do. But to do this well, one must examine and challenge their own views and assumptions. If you are a grown-up who still thinks that everything is either good or bad, you might want to look a little more closely. For me, this is always easiest to do when looking in the rear-view mirror. When I look back on my life, it is clear that some of the best things that ever happened to me were those that I didn't think I wanted to happen. Conversely, some of the things that brought the most pain and the least happiness were the things that I thought would be the best. We are always going to be drawn to choices that seem like the best at the time, but it makes life much easier to process when you realize that you truly have no idea whether it will turn out to be good or bad. This is easier to digest when you realize that good comes out of bad and bad comes out of good. There are no events in life that are completely one or the other. Even the birth of the most wanted child, objectively the best good thing, contains the stress and sleeplessness that feels very bad. Even the miracle of winning the lottery, which seems like the answer to everything wrong in life, can result, as we've seen in documentaries, in personal destruction and your relatives fixating on how they can kill you off to get their hands on the money. People get married, which everyone thinks is good. Then they have children, which is also good. Then they get divorced, which everyone thinks is bad. But is it? It's not that simple. I'm always amused when I read about couples who are at the breaking point because the husband, and it usually is the husband, will not carry half the labor of raising a family. This can lead to a divorce, after which both parents have to do 100% of the labor. The man who won't help with the cleaning or the groceries will then have to do all his own cleaning and all his own grocery retrieval, along with all the cooking. This seems like bad math, but it is the hill that some will die on. Once a family with children decides to split up, the men who may not have wanted to invest their time in the day-to-day labor of raising children will be left with the choice of either doing 100% of the labor of raising his children when they are with him, or abandoning them altogether, which some do. The children have no say in how all of this plays out. But are we to assume that we know how it should turn out? Are all divorces bad for children? Obviously, if there's violence or abuse in the home, anything that removes that from their daily lives is a good thing. But if the divorce involves two fairly decent people who just can't get along, it is possible that the children will end up getting more time with each parent than they did when one could offload their duties while under the original roof. What's bad for the child is the stigma that society places on them because of the divorce. They become children of so-called broken homes. In reality, they may be getting better, less angry, and conflicted versions of each parent. They are just living a different life. But we can't say with certainty that their lives are worse for it. It is never that simple. And say that one parent does use a divorce as a way to abandon their children. Was it better for the child to live under the same roof with someone who thinks and cares so little for them? Engaged, loving parents are not the ones who abandon their children. Disconnected, disinterested parents disappear. Are those the people who should be influencing the children? Do they have anything worthwhile to share with their upbringing and the forming of their life philosophies? Perhaps being spared from exposure to a toxic parent is the very best thing that can ever happen for a child. The child will then be less likely to emulate the toxic parent and instead focus on turning the pain of abandonment into a drive to be the best parent they can be. We just don't know. We don't know how anything is going to turn out. We can't know what joy will turn into pain. We don't know what pain will turn into purpose. We don't know how each choice we make will affect the outcome for anyone. The best we can do is to make choices that reflect a desire for healing, peace, and love. And then we must meet whatever the effects are with those same objectives. This life stuff is complicated. An excess of negativity is toxic. An excess of positivity is toxic. Binary thinking is toxic. We don't live in a world that is black and white. It is all the different shades of gray. We think we know how it is supposed to go, but we don't. We think that if we stick with the societal script of how a life is supposed to play out, that we will be rewarded with peace and joy. If only it were that simple. There are so many curveballs that come our way over the course of a lifetime. So many things that we didn't see coming. So many things that we couldn't anticipate. Even the events that we should have reasonably been able to anticipate seem to floor us. Everyone who has ever had a pet they loved knows, going in, that the pet has a limited lifespan. That is never a secret. But when the pet reaches the end of their time here, many people completely unravel. Knowing beforehand that the experience was going to be a relatively short one does nothing to eliminate the sting. We also know that, most likely, our grandparents and parents will leave this school before we do. That does little to alleviate the grief when the time comes. Even worse are the events that happen outside of the sequence that we expect, like a child dying before their parents. The grief is unimaginable, though we know this can happen. Sometimes we tell children that life is not fair, but that assumes that there is some definable way that life is supposed to go that it strays from occasionally. In reality, we have no idea how life is supposed to go. To tell children that life is full of twists and turns is much more to the point. To help them build the resilience that will be needed to bob and weave and pivot is much more productive. Telling them that if they just do everything right, everything will turn out right, is to lie to them. There are no such guarantees. Get them ready for the challenges. Praise them when they are in the midst of a challenge. Help them see that this is a holy moment. Assure them that if it doesn't go exactly the way they thought it should, that something bigger may be in play. Help them sort through the steps they took and what they might do differently next time around. The experience we are having in this school is never as simple as win versus loss, success versus failure. It is just about having the capacity to face whatever life is and to make the most of that. The true victors are those who continue to grow. The true victors can squeeze all the joy, love, and wisdom out of everything that comes their way. Thanks for returning for another week of Rebirth Revolution. Rebirth Revolution can be found on all the podcast apps, the music apps, and full episodes play on our YouTube and Facebook pages. You can find all episodes on rebirthrevolution.com. Please download, rate, and review whenever you can. Until next week, look in your rearview mirror. Appreciate the twists and turns you have experienced. Stick with your COVID precautions, as an average of 500 people die from COVID every day, and congratulate yourself for getting this far. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and resilient.